Could you forgive the man who savagely shot and murdered your 6-year-old son? Scarlett Lewis did. Her son Jesse, a first grader, was one of the 20 students killed in the Sandy Hook massacre on December 14th, 2012. Later, Scarlett discovered 3 words written by Jesse just hours before his death on the family chalkboard: nurturing, healing, love. That message helped Scarlett redirect her energy. Instead of living in her grief, she learned about the shooter's past and his pain. And then she created social and emotional learning programs for kids all across the world. Tools that Adam Lanza, the deeply disturbed, depressed, and lonely 20-year-old shooter who killed 26 people that day, never had. Those words, nurturing, healing, love, helped Scarlett find purpose after the death of her son. This is Scarlett Lewis's Rebound.
The first time that I saw him, I walked to the nursery. I saw all of these nurses gathered around the window taking pictures. And I walked up behind them and I said, "What are you taking pictures of?" And they said, "There's this enormous baby and he's trying to crawl out of his bassinet." So that's a great way to introduce Jesse. He was larger than life. He was bouncing off the walls. He was always loud and almost always happy and so loving.
So, Scarlett, take me back. What do you remember from the day of the shooting 8 years ago?
I remember everything. It started as a normal morning, as every morning does, as a single parent getting up with 2 boys, full-time job, running around, getting them ready, sending them off, getting to work, and then having people come up to me with the news that there's a shooting in Sandy Hook first, and then at Jesse's school, rushing back to the school only to wait for hours to see if they were going to find him. He was on a long list of missing people for hours, and then being told that your son had been murdered and that you might as well go home. So as Jesse's dad says, sending your child off to school in the morning with a book bag and then receiving him in the evening in a body bag. It was horrendous.
Jesse was 6 years old when he died. He was in the first grade. And he had this amazing, remarkable act of bravery as one of his final things that he did on this earth. Tell us about that.
Yes. We learned very shortly after the tragedy that Jesse had stood up to the shooter. His gun ran out of bullets. So during the short delay, when he was changing his clip, Jesse yelled for his friends to run. And they said it's because he yelled that they ran, and he was able to save 9 of his classmates' lives before the shooter reloaded and killed the rest of the people in the room. So for that act of bravery, he's on the short list for the Medal of Freedom, which is the highest civilian honor.
Wow, that is just incredible. When you look back, Scarlett, at that time period, what helped you process your grief to move forward and to find real purpose?
It was a series of things. It was Jesse's chalkboard message. I knew that if the shooter had been able to give and receive nurturing, healing love himself, that the tragedy would never have happened. And it was my faith. I have a deep faith. It was the example of Jesse's courage. I knew that if my 6-year-old son could do what he did on that day, that certainly I could have the courage, find the courage to prevent and help reduce and prevent the suffering that leads to so much of what we're seeing in our schools that then translate into our homes and communities. That's diseases of despair, not just bullying and violence like Sandy Hook, but substance abuse and suicide, loneliness, all of these issues that continue to increase. Um, I dedicated my life to addressing the cause of all of those.
Scarlett, how long did it take you to find forgiveness?
That's a wonderful question because it really didn't take me a long time.
Mm.
When I saw Jesse's message of nurturing, healing love, I realized that this was something that eluded the shooter, that he was unable to give or receive nurturing, healing love. And because of that realization, I began to feel compassion for him. The go-to after the Sandy Hook tragedy was blame of not only the shooter, but his mother who gave him access to the guns. And I thought, wow, if it really was all of their fault, first of all, it's too easy. Second of all, it would never have happened before, but Columbine had happened, I think, 15 years earlier. And then we had Parkland happen 5 years later. In fact, this year, going into the lockdown, we had 6 school shootings resulting in 4 deaths. That was by early March. 2018 was the deadliest year on record for school shootings. So for me, that kind of blame and finger pointing and fault finding was just simply too easy. I realized that it was going to take all of us taking personal responsibility for what's going on with our kids in order to fix it.
Every December, you're reminded of the anniversary as it goes by year after year. How do you choose to celebrate Jesse's life? How do you not get overwhelmed by grief? And does it get easier as the years go on?
I can tell you that it does not get easier at all. It's still incredibly painful. We do celebrate his life, however, every single day, which is a beautiful thing. And we honor his life every day. It does not get easier for our family, but knowing that the message on the kitchen chalkboard that Jesse left is now in over 10,000 schools in the United States and 110 countries, and helping so many children and adults through difficult times. We get feedback all the time about how Jesse's example of courage and even his life has inspired so many, actually even saved lives. And for me, that's what keeps me going.
If Jesse could talk to you today, what do you think he'd say about the work that you've been able to achieve since his passing?
That's a great question, because sometimes when I mess up, I think, oh my gosh, Jesse, whatever possessed you to think that I could do this? I'm really sorry. And then I realized, wait a minute, he knew you. He knew all of your faults and your weaknesses, and he thought that you could do it. So just keep on going. And I think that he would, I often feel him behind me, nudging me forward. I had teachers that were teaching each chapter from the book, Nurturing, Healing Love, in their classrooms. And one teacher in North Carolina would send me her lesson plan that she created. And at the end of the year, I sent her bands that said Nurturing, Healing Love that she could pass out to the kids. So she wrote me the following year, and she said, when all the kids came back to school, she saw this little boy that had been in her class, but she felt like she could never make a connection with him. And she knew, all the teachers knew, that he was going through such a hard time in his family life. And she could never really make a connection, though. But when he came back to school, she saw that he was wearing his bracelet with the formula on it. And she said, hey, I see that you're still wearing the bracelet after the whole summer. That's amazing. Why do you wear that bracelet every day? And he said, because it reminds me of Jesse's courage. And it reminds me that I can choose love too, no matter what happens in my life. And she wrote me that email And I thought, oh, it just for a moment, I took a deep breath and I thought, wow. And Jesse spoke to me. He literally said, I heard a voice and he said, Mom, if that's all that we did, all that we did together was bring comfort to this one little boy, it would be enough. And so for a moment, I was like, oh, yes, yes.
Yeah.
That would be enough. And then about 2 minutes later, I said, but there's so many other kids that we can help. So we need to keep going. And I love that story. And we are continuing to go.
If you had a chance to speak to the shooter before any of this ever happened, what do you feel in your heart you'd like to say to the shooter?
Wow. If I had the opportunity to be in contact with the shooter before the shooting, I would ask him what I could do to help ease his pain. He was in a tremendous amount of pain. In fact, at the very end, he had been isolated completely for 8 months in his bedroom. He needed help desperately. He needed help his whole life that he wasn't given. And I would have tried to give him that help. That's a fantastic question, because there are kids out there right now that are suffering. And their suffering is so great that it might end up in an attack, because they don't know any other way out than trying to off-put that pain on as many people as they can. So right now, if you're listening and you know a child that's suffering, ask them what you can do to help ease their pain. There's always something that we can do to help ease another's pain. That's probably the most important question that we can ask. Sandy Hook could have been prevented if someone had asked that question.
Do you ever get angry?
I do, absolutely. But it's interesting, not at the shooter.
I'm really struggling with how you're able to have such compassion for a shooter.
You know, I have been approached by people that he went to school with who told me what his experience was like. And it was, there was a lot of bullying. There was a lot of isolation. He was neglected. He might have even been abused by a trusted adult. He had so much pain in his life that it actually doesn't even surprise me that it turned out the way that it turned out. But at the same time, I know that it could have been prevented. And so when I get angry, it's never at him. I feel compassion for him. It's easier for me to be angry for him. That's probably a better description of my anger. I get angry at a system that's slow to change, that focuses on the issues, that waits for issues to arise, and then focuses on the issues rather than focusing on the cause of that pain and suffering. Because you can't be talking about a solution unless you're addressing the cause, what's causing all of this angst and suffering. And so that's what we're trying to do.
How do you find the strength? How do you not fall apart when your greatest treasure in life was so brutally taken away from you? How do you do it?
Well, I want you to know I cry every day. So there you go. I try not to do it on camera, but I do find time every single day. I constantly am in conversation with Jesse.
I love that.
But I do cry every day. So I do let my emotions out. I feel my feelings. I have a whole range of feelings. And coming up to December 14th, it is incredibly difficult. Before I even realize what the date is. I'm feeling the date. And you asked me before, does it get easier? It absolutely, that loss of a child does not get easier. It hasn't gotten easier in the 8 years. But I do think that my honoring him every single day, my work in promoting his message, and I think my living my life in compassion in action, dedicated to service, to serving others, is what helps me find meaning and purpose in my life and helps me to flourish. And it's this formula that actually leads and guides me to finding that meaning and purpose in my life. I think all of us, when we look at what we want for ourselves and what we want for our kids, it is exactly that. And so I literally practice this formula every single day. And I feel like, I think about my life before Jesse's murder, and I did not lead it this way. I mean, I think I was a good person. I tried to be a good person, but I was not leading my life to help other people. In doing that, it is such an incredible source of strength to me, and I'm grateful for that lesson. I feel like it's a gift that Jesse has given me, that understanding of what that chalkboard message meant, and that is to have the courage to step outside of your pain, the pain that I still feel, to help other people. And that is why we're all here. That is ultimately the meaning of life, I think. And I feel grateful every day that I've been given an opportunity to live my life this way. And I wouldn't have without the loss of my son. So I know that that sounds like a dichotomy. Of course, I would give it all up to spend one more second with Jesse. Sorry, but I can't. And so I'm grateful for the gift that I've been given.